Hello, friends and family. How are you doing? How was your week? I hope it was, great, I guess. For me, it was very humbling and very sobering. And before I actually talk about the podcast and get into the psychological aspects of the episode, I really want to take the time to talk about this week and I guess the past weeks and things that have been going on. I live in Nebraska, not too far from Omaha, and one of the 13 service members that died at the attack in Afghanistan at the Kabul airport, he was welcomed home on Friday, September 10th. Omaha was his hometown. He grew up here, and I'm sorry if I get emotional, but I'm also not sorry because it's very humbling and it's very sad. So I want to talk about Cpl Daegan Page real quick, since he's a native of where I currently reside. Now, I try to find a few articles just to kind of get to know him a little bit more, and the first thing I want to say is he was 23 years old, and I'm 26, so he's only a few years younger. He could have been one of my troops if I was in the same service, but I just want to say how amazing Omaha is, and how supportive and how humbling and how everyone of this town, and not even just this town, there were people from all over that came. There was a huge procession line. Well, I wouldn't even say the procession line was huge to bring him home, but there were so many people welcoming him when he arrived at Cpl Airfield, which is our airport. So he landed at our airport, and all the way from the airport to the site where he was going to be buried, or where they were going to have the funeral at, there were just people lined up welcoming him, and they're in support of his family. There were veterans, service members, citizens, not only from the Omaha area, but also from Iowa, and I'm sure even from other states. So I just want to share a little bit about him. And it just really hurts to talk about, but we gotta talk about it. So on his chest, he had tattooed "Death Before Dishonor." He was in the Marine Corps. And according to a lot of his friends and his colleagues, he 100% believed in what was tattooed on his chest. He truly believed in his service, he believed in honor, and he believed in all of the core values of the Marine Corps. He loved this country, and he served with honor. I'm going to read a few quotes from other people in this as well. Corporal Wyatt Johnson, he served with Cpl Page very recently, from 2010 to 2020 at Camp Pendleton. And he said that Daegan was the guy in the company that always had a smile on his face, even during the worst times. Everyone knew him, and he knew everyone, and that he would be missed by everyone. Not only was he a good Marine, but he was a better friend. Another quote, similarly to me and to a lot of people that I served with, he joined shortly after high school. He grew up in Iowa and Nebraska. And for those that aren't familiar with where Omaha is located, it's literally on the line between Iowa and Nebraska. Like, literally, when you drive to the airport, depending on which route you take, it will say, "Welcome to Iowa," and then it'll say, "Welcome to Nebraska," and then "Welcome to Iowa," because of the state lines are kind of weird. This is what kind of really hits me, because I know people that have been a part of some of the activities that he was part of. He was active in the Boy Scouts, and he enjoyed playing youth hockey with the Omaha Hockey Club. Now, this really hurts because I know of a couple of friends that were stationed here at one time that are part of the Omaha Hockey Club, and they even had a hockey club specifically for service members. And I think they're also part of that, but a branch off. So I don't know if he ever participated in that, because just because he's from here, he wasn't stationed here. Now, things that his family have said. He loved the brotherhood of the Marines, and he was raised in Red Oak, Iowa, and also in the Omaha metro area. He loved hunting and spending time outdoors with his dad, as well as being on the water. He had a soft spot for dogs. He will also be remembered for his tough outer shell and his giant heart. Our hearts are broken. That was a statement that his family said on Facebook. Only 2 weeks after his arrival into his deployment, that's when he was killed. Another Marine sergeant that served with him for 2 years said that he was genuinely a sweet guy and he was always smiling and happy. Oh, and I'm scrolling through here and I'm just seeing so many statements about him. Not only about him, but by the others that we lost. And I'm just making this tribute for him just because he is from the area that I currently live and got to witness everyone coming together and just America coming together for this fallen hero. And I'm sure it happened for all of our fallen heroes and whatever their hometowns were. But it just kind of gets me very emotional reading about this. And there's another statement that I want to read from his family that they put on Facebook after the procession and after the funeral. This is what they said. Omaha, you never looked better. It was an amazing honor to bring Daegan home to the open arms of his hometown today. We wish we could have stopped and thanked every person who took time out of their day to pay their respects to Daegan. We want you to know we saw all of you. Police officers, firefighters, school children, veterans, service members, families, the brave souls camped out on every overpass, the construction workers along I-80 at 84th Street, the crowds all down Millard Avenue, the Patriot Guard riders, and all the thousands of people who waved flags, held signs, and even brought their dogs to salute Daegan, because remember, he was a huge dog lover. He would have been amazed, which I'm sure he is. Sorry, tearing up here a little bit. Daegan's homecoming was truly a hero's welcome. Our hearts are still broken, but we are the lucky few who know what it is like to receive a hug from the city of Omaha. Thank you, family of Cpl Daegan Page. Sorry, I'm trying not to get emotional, but it's just so hard because I think about my own service. I was fortunate enough to never having to deploy, but I have plenty of friends that have. I have a lot of friends from back home that are part of different branches, and I think about them and their faces. I think about those that are around that age that I'm super close with, and that could happen to them, and it's just so hard. And being so young, I do want to say I wanted to read his obituary real quick, and then maybe we can talk about the other things of this week. So, this is gonna get really hard. He was preceded in death by his grandfather, Roger Page, cousin Nathan Page, grandparents Gary and Alice Adelson, and uncle Kurt Adelson. He was survived by his parents, Wendy and Craig Adelson, and Greg and Jenny Page, brothers and sisters Corey, Kylie Adelson, Garrett Ross, Mason Page, and Emerson Page, his girlfriend, Jessica Ellison, grandparents, Royce Page, Keith and Peggy Ty, and Ron and Christine Thompson, nephew Wes Adelson, and many aunts, uncles, and other relatives and friends. They are going to have a celebration of his life. There are pictures before his deployment with him and his girlfriend. I don't know what else to say that I haven't already said. But I just want to say from my heart to the family and the families of Daegan Page, not only him, but the other service members that died in the Kabul attack. My heart goes out to you. You are in my thoughts and my prayers. And thank you for your service members' sacrifice. On another very humbling and sobering note, over the weekend, of course, was the remembrance of September 11th, 2001, in which many people lost their lives. And for me, I was very young when it happened. I was actually in first grade. And I remember that day pretty clearly, even though it's still a little bit of a blur. But I remember them rushing us to the gym and crowding us all there, and we were on lockdown. The thought at the time was they didn't know what else was going to happen, and they were in fear of other attacks on other buildings in the United States. And I lived and grew up in around Nashville at that time. And so the thought was that maybe they would go after the Sears Tower in Chicago or even another building closer to home. So until it was deemed safer, we got to go home. And I remember watching videos about what happened, and I didn't fully understand it, but I think what really hit me and what really helped me understand was I remember watching on the news, there was this little girl around my age with her older sister, and they were talking about how their dad was a New York firefighter and how they lost their dad. And it was just very emotional for me for being that young and just knowing, oh, they lost someone. And then over the years, every year in school on that day, they would play a video and we would remember it. And another thing that really sticks out to me was when I first came to Nebraska when I was stationed here. And I actually arrived here September 1st, 2014. And so 10 days later, it was September 11th, and I was new to the unit. And pretty much every day at 4:30, or around 4:30, the national anthem is played on base. So I remember all of us going outside and just waiting for the national anthem to play. And we all stood at attention and saluted during the national anthem. And after that, we just talked about our experiences. And I remember the older leaders, they talked about how they were deployed at that time or were stationed overseas. And it was just so humbling to hear their experiences. And then some of them being deployed to Afghanistan. So not only all of those service members that lost their lives during the wars that happened, but also on that day of September 11th, all the lives that were lost in New York, in Pennsylvania, because there was a plane that went down there. It's just very hard to think that happened. But unfortunately it did. All we can do is remember the families and the people that lost their lives on that day and remember what happened. But even out of all the tragedy, I remember our country coming together. We were all Americans. It didn't matter if we were conservative or liberal, if we were Republican or Democrat. It didn't matter what issues and which aisle we stood on. And a few days ago when they brought Daegan home, there was that same feeling. We were all Americans. We were all mourning the loss of our fallen hero, and we were all welcoming him home. Okay, so I know that was very sobering, very low. Emotionally, for me, it's very hard to talk about. But like I said, we have to talk about it. We have to remember the sacrifices that our service members have. Their commitment to our country, their service to our country. And as a veteran, it's just humbling. I don't know what else to say, honestly. I don't know what else to say. I'm sorry. I can't say any more about the topic. Whew! That first part was very hard, very tough, and I'm going to try to bring the energy up just a little bit. So I'm going to talk about the other parts of my week. My week was pretty good besides those parts. I got to host a game night at my house. I had some friends over, and we had such an amazing time. It was so good for me. It's been such a long time since we've been able to all gather together and just enjoy each other's company. Also, I got to witness my friend getting baptized, so that was a very special moment in the week. So how was your week besides the very sad things that we already talked about? I hope you had a decent week. So, with that, I'm your host, Katie Gonzalez, and you're listening to What the Psychology. Now we're going to go into the episode. Before we really dive in, I did a poll not too long ago, and I asked you guys what was the definition of maladaptive. Because in my podcast, I use that word a lot because it is very important, it is very specific, So my poll question, I asked what maladaptive meant, and the choices: A, interference with daily life; B, manipulating your symptoms; C, being happy and healthy; or D, a condition that is terminal. Some people voted wrong, some people voted right, and it's okay if you voted wrong, because we are here to learn and get to know, I guess, some of these terms a little bit better. So the correct answer is interference with daily life. So for all of you that got it right, give yourselves a pat on the back. So like today's episode, which we're going to talk about anxiety disorders. An anxiety disorder gets diagnosed when the symptoms are maladaptive, meaning when they interfere so much with your life that you can't really function. You can't do daily tasks, you can't shower, you can't make your bed, you can't leave your home, in the sense of things that we've already talked about. Episode 1, we talked about phobias, social anxiety, and agoraphobia. Now, all of those are technically anxiety disorders, but they all are very similar to where it's more under a phobia type. They're separate and distinguished, but very similar in the aspect that it's very focused on like an object, a place, or a thing. That's why I put all of those together. And then we talked about in the stress episode that chronic stress can lead to disorders, including anxiety, including depression. We're going to go over 3 anxiety disorders. And the definition of an anxiety disorder is mental disorders that come with excessive worry, fear, and nervousness. The first anxiety disorder that we're going to talk about is generalized anxiety disorder, or we like to call it GAD, which is a really funky name for it, and I love it in every way. This is the anxiety disorder that I suffer from. Now you can get to know me a little bit more. We already talked about depression, now we can talk about anxiety. This disorder is marked by worry and tension. Its symptoms are often unrelated to what's happening and seem to come out of nowhere to affect mental health. Some feelings are restlessness, being on edge, irritability. Thoughts could be excessive worry, unrealistic views, trouble concentrating. Physical symptoms could be muscle tension, headaches, sweating, nausea, needing to go to the bathroom often, tiredness, sleeping problems, trembling, startling easily. Now, let me break this down for myself a little bit. So feelings, I definitely feel restless a lot, and I do get irritable sometimes, depending on the day. I'm sure my husband would probably say, yeah, she's irritable all the time. Not all the time, but he would probably jokingly say that. Thoughts, I definitely worry excessively. Like I said in the stress episode, I am always stressed. I'm always thinking. My mind is always somewhere, and it's really hard for me to relax. I also have a lot of unrealistic views sometimes, mainly about myself, and I think that kind of comes into play with depression and anxiety combined. Concentrating, I don't really have too much trouble with that, but on days where I'm just don't want to do anything, it is really hard to concentrate on what I need to do. Physical, I only really deal with sleep problems and startling easily. And my husband can attest to that. Sometimes he'll just walk in the room and I won't even know. And then I'll notice he's there and I'll just jump and I'll be like, gosh, you scared me. He's like, I just walked into the room. It's not like I purposely scared you. But I don't know, I startle easy for some reason. I think it's because my mind will be so focused on something, or I'll be lost in my thoughts, and then I won't realize he entered the room, and then I realize he entered the room and I get startled. So, oh man, so there's that. The prevalence and the causes of generalized anxiety disorder. It's about 6% of the US population, which means it's diagnosed. More common in women than in men. 65% of women suffer from generalized anxiety disorder. Now, disclaimer here, men, you guys are going to get all the winning points for this episode because all of these conditions are more common in women. So, we're just giving you guys a lot of points for this one. Now, some biological causes of generalized anxiety disorder. They think that there's a biochemical dysfunction in the brain which involves the gamma aminobutyric acid, or known as GABA, and it's a major inhibitory neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitters are my favorite thing. I geek out over those. Remember, recap, neurotransmitters is the example I gave of the neurotransmitters are the people waiting outside of the club, and the regulation receptors is the bouncer. So remember that as we go through these, because all of these have something to do with neurotransmitters. Now, another cool note when it comes to GABA, an undersupply of GABA is linked to having seizures, tremors, and insomnia. It's also, if there's a dysfunction in this, it's linked to generalized anxiety disorder. And I just find this so interesting because, like I said, I do have issues with insomnia, and they also say that a dysfunction of this neurotransmitter is linked to both insomnia and anxiety. So maybe that's my issue. I mean, I think that's the only thing they can really find in this anxiety disorder. It's a biological cause. Okay, next we are going to talk about panic disorder. Now, panic disorder is very different than post-traumatic stress disorder. With post-traumatic stress disorder, we'll talk about that in another episode. There are some elements of panic in that, but these are two different conditions, okay? So just remember that. They are distinguished in their own way. With panic disorder, panic attacks, they are the main feature of this mental health condition. But many of these symptoms, they seem physical, yet the state isn't physically dangerous. So that is kind of similar to PTSD, but PTSD is caused by a traumatic event, okay? So with panic disorder, some thoughts and feelings, you get the sense of impending doom, fear of death, or feeling of unreality. Some physical symptoms is like nausea, chest pain, headache, lightheadedness, numbness or tingling, shortness of breath, rapid heart rate, trembling, chills, sweating, and or abdominal cramping. So 2 to 3% of the US population is diagnosed with this. And I do know that I have some global listeners, so in future episodes, I'm going to try to find some percents that are also not only prevalent to the US, but also globally. So that is something that I will look into so that I can include you guys as well. But a lot of the studies that I see are mainly US focused. So this is also more common in women. So another point for men. Now biological, this is abnormal transmitter activity. It doesn't say which neurotransmitter. It could probably be quite a few that I can think of, but I don't want to say which one and be wrong. But it's also due to improper functioning of the limbic system. Now remember, the limbic system is the fight or flight system that we have talked about in the past. Now we're going to get more in depth in this part. And I'm really hoping in another episode I just dive into the brain, because everything we talk about, obviously it's mental. It all has to do with the mind and the brain. And I completely geek out over the brain. Anyway, back to what I was saying. With panic disorder, there are two components of the limbic system that have some sort of dysfunction, which causes this disorder. The first one could be the amygdala, and this is involved in emotions by influencing aggression, anger, and fear. It's providing emotional element of memories and interpretation of others' emotional expressions. You will probably hear about the amygdala a lot because the amygdala is affected by other mental disorders or personality disorders as well. Another component of the limbic system that is affected by dysfunction that can cause this disease is also the hypothalamus. And this is involved in the regulation of basic drives, so hunger, thirst. There's also arousal, like sexual arousal. And when I say arousal, it's just not sexual arousal, it's arousal of other things. Panic disorder can also be a cognitive cause, or not even a cause, but this is something that is prevalent in those with panic disorder. Cognitively, panic-prone individuals, they are usually overly sensitive to bodily sensations. The last disorder that I'm going to go over is obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. I have a few people in my family, and even I say it too, is we always say, oh, we're a little bit OCD. For example, I'm going to pick on my mom. So my mom growing up, she's very organized. She keeps everything in a certain place, in a certain order. On our stove, she would have the salt in one place, she would have the pepper in another, and she would have like decorations or like little letters. And me and my sister used to always mess with my mom. We would switch like the salt and pepper, or we would slightly move one of the decorative letters or something. And I swear, we would always just do it to pick on her and see. But every single time, y'all, she would spot the difference. I swear, if you give her one of those puzzles that say, like, where's Waldo, or spot the difference, she would be quick at solving that, because we would even just push the pepper slightly to the right, and she could come into the kitchen and be like, alright, who moved the pepper? Because she would know that we were messing with her. Also, my niece, she's also very organized as well. She's very intelligent for her age. She's very, she's very creative. She has a very wild imagination. But she is also very organized, she wants things in a certain order, just like my mom is. And it's funny to see generational how that works. But now when it comes to, like, people that are actually diagnosed with this, it's definitely more serious. So, obsessive compulsive disorder, this includes unwanted repetitive thoughts, which is obsessive, and or actions, which are compulsions. So, the obsessive component is repetitive thoughts, and the compulsion aspect is actions. So, to go into this a little bit more. So, obsessive component, persistent, intrusive thoughts, ideas, impulses, or images. This could be like the fear of dirt or contamination. So we always use the term germaphobe, but they're probably OCD, and that's just an aspect of their obsessive component. It could be doubting, uncertainty, needing things to be symmetrical, thoughts of losing control, and in some cases, even harming yourself. Unwanted aggression, sexual or religious thoughts. So the obsessive part, it can be so minor as wanting things to be symmetrical to where it becomes a compulsion, or it could be just that thought interferes so much to where it bothers you to where you literally cannot do anything else until you fix where things are symmetrical. So if you need things to be symmetrical and then you fix it, and it's good, you're fine, and you move on, that's kind of a minor case. That's kind of like if we use my mom as an example. But if you have a stack of blocks and they have to be exact order, exact time, and every time you look at it, it's not perfect, and you have to keep doing it over and over again, and you can't get over the thought of it not being symmetrical, that's when it becomes a maladaptive type of situation. Now, compulsions, that's the action component. This is repetitive and rigid behavior that a person feels compelled to perform in order to reduce their anxiety. So this can be excessive washing and cleaning, checking, counting, strict adherence to a routine, needing constant reassurance. If you're more into the fear of dirt and contamination, more of the germophobic aspect of this, and you just constantly wash your hands over and over again, and you just can't stop washing your hands because you're worried about germs and the fear of contamination, that's when it becomes maladaptive. The compulsion is excessively washing your hands and cleaning them. The obsessive or the thought process is the fear of dirt or contamination. I hope that makes more sense. Some people, they have to strictly adhere to a routine, where they wake up at a certain time, they have to make their coffee at this time, it better be ready by this time. Like, there is a certain order and it's very strict. And if they break that routine, they become very anxious. Anxiety overcomes them. Whereas someone without this disorder, if something is off in their routine a little bit, it's like, it's okay. I may be off 10 minutes, but it's fine. But with this disorder, it has to be to the T. It has to be perfect. And anything altering from that, it's a problem for that person. So now I'm going to play a clip from Dr. Phil, and it's about this man who talks about his OCD and his daily routine.
I have obsessive compulsive disorder. Living with myself is horrible. There's not a moment in the day I'm not thinking about my OCD. It's always on my mind. It shakes all the time. I'm anxious, anxiety. Order rules my life. Everything has rules. I can spend anywhere up to 2 hours in the shower. There's this very specific order. I scrub the hell out of my head. I gotta wash it and rinse it a minimum of 3 times. I have to do everything the exact right way. Otherwise, I won't be able to continue. The last time, I was probably in there for 4 or 5 hours. A lot of times, the water will get cold. This is where I sleep. I'm not gonna be able to get it perfect because I'll be here all day. If this is not done the right way when I got up, I can't move on to the next step. This has to satisfy the OCD. I gotta let the coffee pot soak for a certain amount of time. And then I gotta wash the top of it, then the filter, in that order. Then I gotta let them dry for a certain amount of time until my OCD is satisfied. The last time I attempted to wash the coffee pot, I hit the 2 hour mark and I just was exhausted. I couldn't go on any further. It's like, who the hell does it? I'm thinking about holding this remote now. What is bothering me, I remembered I haven't washed my hands yet today. I feel like I've contaminated it now. Ideally, I would like to get a Clorox wipe and wipe it down. But it's just too much work going in the cabinet, so I just avoid going in there. Any door is a problem. I'll have to do it maybe about 7 times. Then I have to do this maybe about 7 times. This another 7 times. Maybe if I get to 21, 21 is supposed to be a lucky number. The OCD has grown, so forget the lock. Now, before I can even shut the door, I have to verify I didn't drop anything. So I have to take inventory of the things that are on the ground. I'll remember what that looks like. I'll think, can I lock it now? I'm not satisfied. So I'll open it again. I'll be opening and closing the door. At a minimum, 5 attempts. I'm a prisoner in my own head until I can get out of it. Torture, tormenting me. It harasses me constantly. Every moment of the day is agony. I know I'm not crazy, but it's just my OCD doesn't accept it. I'm on the verge of being homeless and I will end up being alone.
So prevalence and causes. 1 to 3% of the U.S. population is diagnosed with this condition. It is a biological cause for the most part. Now, when it comes to OCD, they say it's an imbalance in the neurotransmitter serotonin. And if you remember correctly, serotonin and a underlining amount of it was the cause of depression. When it comes to OCD, it just says an imbalance. Now, this could mean that it has an excessive amount. It doesn't say, because it's also important to know that neurotransmitters, they also react with other things in the brain, other neurotransmitters. So it could be an imbalance that affects something else. It can be a very complex thing. Serotonin, it affects mood, so like in depression. Hunger, sleep, and arousal. It can affect those things. And when we say arousal, it's not just sexual arousal. It can be arousal in causing compulsions or the obsessive, intrusive thoughts when it comes to this condition. Another biological cause of this is an oversensitivity of the frontal lobe region of the brain. The frontal lobe, it's the primary motor cortex, so that could definitely explain the compulsions that this person is having. The frontal lobe also plays a part when it comes to judgment, obviously movement, intelligence. It helps us anticipate the consequences of our actions, which goes into the judgment part. It also aids in planning of future actions, personality development, impulse control, focusing your attention, coordinating and adjusting complex behaviors. So like, I can't do A until B happens. So, do you think you suffer from any of these disorders? Even minor? I know people in my family, if I were to look at their symptoms, I would say, yeah, they probably have OCD, but it's not so maladaptive to where they need to be treated or diagnosed. It's at their level, they can manage it at their own. But in some cases where it's actually diagnosed, then treatment needs to take place in order for the lives of those that suffer with it or better. Now, a lot of the therapies that come with these disorders like cognitive behavioral. So they focus on helping you combat the thoughts that you're thinking. So with generalized anxiety disorder, if you're overgeneralizing a situation, they help you overcome those excessive thoughts that you're thinking or the unrealistic thoughts that you may be thinking. When it comes to obsessive compulsive disorder, they do the same thing, but depending on the disorder or the aspect of the disorder that you suffer with most, they will focus on that area and use therapy as a tool to make things easier and more manageable. With panic disorder, they also do the same, but there are other things that they teach you, especially with panic disorder. It's more of how to relax, which a lot of those we went over in the stress episode. That also goes along with GAD as well, because I've had to use that in my therapy of learning how to take time out of my day to actually make myself relax. Whether that's seeing nature, spending time with friends, doing a hobby, getting a massage, painting, listening to music, whatever it is that you like to do that helps you relax or enjoy life, those can be very therapeutic in some of these conditions. But cognitive behavioral therapy is the main avenue to help with these conditions. Do you have family members that you move stuff around just to mess with their minds? How cruel. Sorry, Mom. My mom's probably listening to this and rolling her eyes and just traumatized with how mean we were to her growing up. But we love her very much. And if you're not picked on, you're not loved. So there's that. I am your host, Katie Gonzalez, and you've been listening to What the Psychology.
Make sure you like us on Instagram, Twitter, join the Facebook group, like the page, send us an email, be our best friends, get a sticker, and we will see you next week.
Stay psyched, y'all.